It's Workshop Wednesday. Welcome to my workshop. I'm Chelsea Bussemeyer, and I'm so excited to have you here to talk specifically about petite sizing and adjusting for petite. Now, this concept we're going to talk about today, it really actually doesn't matter if you're petite or extra tall, or if you have a place anywhere that just is consistently off with sizing. Today is going to be a great episode in understanding more in depth the concept of fit and what things need to be adjusted in a pattern so that it fits your body perfectly. Now, when we're talking about petite, we often think of height or length, just because petite is the name we've given for shorter pattern sizing and garments. But when we're talking about really petite in a way that we want to understand really great fit, it's not only the distance from the top of the garment to the bottom that needs to be considered. It's not just about chopping it off or adding more length if we're tall. The thing that we really need to consider is the distance in between our horizontal lines or our circumference measurements. So we take circumference measurements when sewing at the biggest or smallest portions of our body, as we're not the same size all the way down. We have bigger areas like our bust, smaller areas like our waist, and then again flaring to bigger over the hips and tapering down. So since we're constantly fading out, fading in, the distance in between these measurements, the larger ones and the smaller ones, they need to taper at the right speed. So we need to be tapered in by the waist. We need to be tapered back out by the time we get to the hips. And if the distance in between these measurements isn't right, then you're going to have all sorts of wonky fit. So let's take a look at just this little paper mannequin that I've made to understand this concept a little bit more in depth. Okay, so here we go. Here we have the human shape, silhouette. And when we're talking about proportions, this is where you can really see what I mean by larger areas, smaller areas. And if we're adjusting a pattern down, we need to know how long of a distance we have in between where we're flaring out and where we're tapering into. So for example, if I was, whether or not actually I was petite or just had a shorter than average distance between my shoulder and my bust, the height of my bust, then a pattern would need to be shortened only in this area. You could easily just take it off the top of the straps. However, that would pull the armhole also up. So that might cut in underneath your armhole. If you're taking it off the straps, then you will adjust the depth of the neckline. So being aware of the other factors that are adjusting when you're taking off length is what's going to help you understand what needs to be adjusted when you're lengthening or shortening any aspect. That's throws me off there to just saying shortening, taking in, making the distance smaller. I feel like there should be a better word that's not coming to me at the moment. But here's the same thing. A lot of times in petite, you may feel like the waist is sitting at the wrong spot. So it may feel tight at the waist when the waist is sitting too low on you, even though the rest of the garment up at the top is feeling correct. So you may like the depth of the neckline, you may like the depth of the armhole, it may be comfortable, but you may need to shorten the distance up just in between where your bust and your waist is sitting. And that's true of all of the areas where we take circumference measurements. That the distance in between those circumference measurements needs to be proportional to our shape as well. Same with the arms, the length of the arms and the length of the legs. When we're adjusting anything down, we still need to have the garment wide enough for the thigh. If it's a tapered garment and you want really skinny ankles, then you need the circumference and the height measurements, the distance in between those circumference measurements to be understood. Understanding that concept is really the key for you to unlock where your pattern needs to be adjusted. Oftentimes patterns will have locations marked in of the bust and the waist and the hips, and that is super handy. But if your pattern doesn't have those marked in, then you can also start from one point. I always like to start from the top of my pattern. So I use kind of the top, the center front as reference, and then I'll just measure down to the bust and check that length, and from the bust to the waist. And also, if your pattern doesn't have those points of reference, you can get an idea of where they were intended to be just by measuring your flat pattern, in that where is the widest area in the upper chest, where is the smallest, most tapered area, that will be where your waistline is. And getting those circumference measurements to really line up with your body's proportions is what's going to help you unlock the key to know where your pattern needs to be adjusted so that your pattern best fits you. Whenever we're adjusting patterns, we always want two things. Obviously, we want it to fit our bodies, but we also want it to be the minimum amount of adjustments that are necessary to the pattern, just to speed up the process and make our lives a little easier. So when you understand really where it needs to come out, then you're not just shortening, the length of the hem and then everything being off in that your neckline is too low, or your darts are ending at the wrong spot, so they're not ending at where your bust, the fullness of your bust is. Your waist will be dropped down onto your hips, and all sorts of things will be thrown into the mix if we're not really understanding where our circumference measurements are and how they relate to the other measurements in our pattern. So when it comes to petite, another thing that's really important is understanding how different lines and cuts and styles, and this brings us kind of back to proportional measurements, as well as personal preference in shape and style. So when I teach fit, I always teach it broken down into those three categories: that it needs to physically fit you, you need to physically be able to put it on, but proportional fit as well as the fit of the style needs to measure up. And when it comes to petite sizes, there are a few more aspects. It's not only your personal preference and style, although if something is not your style, I always say it doesn't matter if it suits your body type, you're still never gonna wanna wear it. So, but with petite, it's really, really important where you cut yourself horizontally in a garment. So where the waistline is, and where the hem of your trousers or your pants are, your pant legs, because you can do a lot of kind of optical stretching, but also shortening of your proportions that can really be perceived by the eye in a negative way, that if you just adjust where that line is, even just by a slight adjustment, you can really learn how to flatter your body and use those proportional and optical illusions to really bring your style to the next level and really love your garments and your fashion and how it flatters you. So when it comes to petite, the main thing you need to watch out for is any kind of dropped waist. The reason for this is you're lengthening your torso and shortening your legs whenever you have a dropped waist. And if that difference between the torso and the legs isn't enough, then it will just look off to our perception, and it will decrease your height and shorten you up even more than you actually are. So high-waisted garments are really flattering for both petite as well as any other reason you might want to lengthen your legs. We had a question emailed in. Janice is just has a long torso, and she's saying she notices that she really likes high-waisted garments and they flatter her most. And so we'll just dive into that adjustment here right away there, Janice, how you can think about that with adjusting your patterns. But for that reason, having that high-waisted pants or lower portion of her wardrobe, her garments, that shortens up the length of her torso and proportionally makes her legs look longer. So that is a really great kind of trick when you're talking about petite as well. If high-waisted isn't your jam, then you can also go with a regular waist. Just be aware of dropped waist or wearing your garments too low on your hips, that could be causing you to look shorter than you actually are. Think about the length of your hems. So whether it be a skirt or a dress or even pants, oftentimes any kind of high water pants or kind of in between length pants won't really flatter you as much as wearing a true shorts, even if it is a longer short. Play around with different lengths of hems, same with skirts and dresses. It's really important where those hems sit and cut you off, that it's not taking away the height that you want to expand on. Sometimes having an empire waist, so this is true for like wedding gowns or anytime you want to have a long formal gown, sometimes an empire waist is really great for petite, as it gives you again a long section below. Sometimes it's best though to just have like the princess seam and not have any break for a waist at all in the height, and just have the full length of your true you. So if you are wearing any kinds of jumpsuits or dresses or longer garments, sometimes it's nice to just have a straight line. And so play around with different styles that way, but be aware of styles that are proportionally torquing or throwing off different aspects of your height. I wanted to give a quick little shout out to Rita as well. She messaged in a lovely little note. Thank you for that. And was just mentioning that she's a petite size and is finding it tricky to get those proportions really right for you or for her. And my tip to you, Rita, is really observe your body shape. The number one key to unlocking how to create garments that fit your proportions is understanding your shape. It's kind of like a puzzle. If you play or build puzzles a lot, your eye will start to pick up those pieces and remind you, I've seen that shape before. So when you understand your shape, where do you need fullness? Where do you need to remove fullness? Where do you need length? Where do you need to take out length? You will get a better understanding the more you kind of work through it, and the more observant you are with the fullness and the shape of your patterns compared to your body. And adding and subtracting at the correct location is really important and understandable when you look at it from the aspect of what is my actual true shape. Do I need fullness in my waist in the front of my garment? Do I need fullness for my hips on the sides of my garment? Or do I need it in the back? Or do I need it both places? Some of us that are really straight need to just take out the curves and straighten out the lines in our garments. So being observant of your shape and understanding that in comparison with your patterns is going to be the key to get you to the right shape and the right fit every time. Thanks again for joining me here on Workshop Wednesday, and I look forward to seeing your comments, hearing your comments, and chatting more in the Facebook group. So don't forget to join my Facebook group if you're watching on YouTube here, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week on Workshop Wednesday.